Hi, I'm Izzy Gentry, and thanks for jumping into Made to Walk today. We are talking about atypical parenting in church. I myself am a parent of an atypical child, and I found out very young or very early that our youngest had autism, and so we were able to intervene very early on and get him the resources that he needs. But we still deal with a lot of social issues, and so we made the decision some months ago to go ahead and move into homeschooling, and that has opened up many doors for us to learn how many other families are engaging in homeschooling and are not really necessarily connected with churches because of the limitations that comes with having an atypical child. And so an atypical child can be someone who has ADD, ADHD, OCD, autism. Many different things fall into this category, but essentially just can't do your standardized classroom activities, can't focus the way people expect them to, quote unquote. So I really wanted to talk to you about ways that you can start to open up and bridge the conversation between yourself as the parent and the church. I have another video specifically for churches on how to bridge the communication between the church and you. And I hope that you'll take that as a listen to as well, and encourage your leadership to take a listen to that so that they can find ways to communicate and gauge in gathering all of the information necessary for an atypical child. But today I just want to talk to parents specifically. So, acceptance. Every day is a new blessing and a new challenge all at once. I can say that whenever we feel like we're in a challenge, we're like, it's just the challenge for today, and tomorrow will bring a new one. We know that, and we embrace that, and we consider it to be our norm, if you will, but it is just part of the atypical journey. No one has spent the time you have researching, learning, adapting, and developing an environment for success. You are the parent. You know your kid. You've seen them through the high highs and the low lows and the fun smiles, laughs, the in-betweens, the cries, the discouragement, and the disappointments all along the way. And so we're going to help you to fully find ways to communicate your process and your experience. 6 typical things that are used for an atypical child. So you may have experienced this once or twice or multiple times. And if you have, just, bear through it. You can nod your head along, go, yeah, we've gone through that. And hopefully we can help you to find a resolution. Number 1, a child is treated with the same level of correction as a disciplinary circumstance. So in other words, an atypical child who's not doing something for to be disobedient would be treated as if they are trying to deliberately be disobedient. Number 2, a child is asked to sit with an adult separately. Number 3, a child is left out from participating in a game or activity. Number 4, a child is rarely called upon to give an articulate answer during the Q&A. Number 5, a child might be ignored because others don't know how to engage with him or her. And number 6, a teacher might think love looks like engagement, which might accidentally enable a negative behavior. So I've seen it on both sides where there's a lot of discouragement, and then I've seen it on other sides where we might have someone that thinks something's really funny, and it tends to be very obnoxious to some, and others engage with it from time to time. So they keep doing it because they think it's the fun or right thing to do, and it ends up only encouraging a negative behavior. So I want to jump into 7 things to help you to communicate, love and safety in a way that will hopefully connect. And the first one is, don't assume that your church has a plan. So one thing that I've learned about churches is that it's really just a giant voluntary access point. And everybody is volunteering to find a way to engage in a positive way, but it does not necessarily mean that they are equipped to do so fully. We want to give them the space to grow, though. Don't just come in like a firestorm, like, you guys didn't do this, you guys didn't do that, you don't have this, you don't have that. If they're a certified school, if they are a certified university, Obviously, I feel very, very differently about those particular situations, and I can go on to a whole tangent about that. But when it comes to churches in particular, gives them the opportunity to be willing to grow, to be willing to learn. And if they don't want to have the conversation, just ask yourself whether or not you need to be there. A child plan that is short and easy to read can go long in the volunteer world. Volunteers change on the fly. So if there's a check-in board with your child's plan, should be attached to it for whoever is working with your kiddo. So, in other words, sometimes volunteers rotate from week to week so that they don't have to be in there all the time. And if your child is going to be there, every single week, you want to make sure that you have some kind of plan in place. I do have a link to a template that I have for you. I also have in my other video a breakdown of what is in that template for churches that, again, you can share with leadership. But creating some kind of communication is like, this is my child's triggers. They're violently allergic to this. Like, maybe if you're going to do really high lights and sound, maybe they should step out of the room for 5 to 10 minutes when you're going to do that part, so on and so forth. Don't rely on one person to communicate that plan to. So sometimes what tends to happen is you have this really long, heartfelt conversation with somebody. You feel like you really connect with someone in leadership. You feel like they really understand your situation. And then they get sick and they're not there, or they get a job in Washington and they move away. And you are stuck going, oh my gosh, like, who am I going to turn to? They were the only person who knew how to deal with my kid. And in reality, it's really important that you are communicating with the leadership about what needs to happen on a week-to-week basis so that they can inform the volunteer that's in charge of your child, like, hey, just so you know, you're going to have this kiddo, and these are some things that you need to know about this kiddo. Number 3, give limitations and alternative. If your child can't have a certain food for a party, provide an alternative. If your child doesn't speak well, express the best way to engage in conversation. If your child needs medication, express the urgency of the need for such. So, in other words, try to take all the room out of the guesswork out. Because if you're assuming somebody else should just know what to do, I can't tell you how many experts in a field, people with a PhD, with a master's degree, with, whatever. If you do not lay it out very, very, very specifically, they don't know. They just don't know. Everyone communicates differently and they understand information differently. So it is better to be safe than sorry. Always, again, the whole point of Made to Walk is to be proactive, not reactive. So be as proactive in your communication as possible. Leave all the guesswork out of it. Number 4, friends are the future. It's important to make sure little ones make friends, but the best way to do this is to watch mom and dad do the same. If there's not an atypical moms, dads, parents group, then I highly recommend you talk to your leadership about starting one. Don't force other kids to understand, and don't force little ones to act like other kids. I think that one of the saddest parts about society with atypical children is that we feel like if they don't conform and if they don't learn to just be a part of the system, that they're never going to have a full life. And the truth of the matter is that there's a bunch of people who feel the same way as you. You just have to get connected with those people. So if your kids can't participate in other things, I guarantee you there's other people in your congregation who also can't participate in those things. So maybe there's an alternative. Like if everyone's going on a field trip or a youth camp that your kid is just not equipped to do, maybe there's another group of kids who have a half-day fun day doing something else around the same time. Find those alternatives and learn to cultivate relationships with other families that you can communicate with and that understand your experiences. Know when to fold. Number 5, not every kid is built for every available option. For example, if your child is sensory sensitive, then I would say that the Six Flags trip might just have to be something we skip. It's unfair to assume that the volunteers can handle the expectations, and it's unfair to your kiddo to make him or her miserable just for inclusion. So if you know that something is going to be difficult, or a scary at-risk situation, like if you have a child that's a runner and you want them to go on a trip that's going to have, 2,000 people in any one area, that's just not the environment that you necessarily need to put them in, because it's not realistic to try to make them conform to that space. Find ways to create inclusion at times that it's necessary, and then find ways to just know that's just not for us, like that we're just not going to do that. We don't necessarily have to try to get the whole thing canceled, because I have seen some people do this where they're like, well, I don't think that anyone should go on the trip if not everyone can go on the trip. There are just things that you have to know it's just not for us. And like I said, don't allow that to be a closed door. That's not a closed door. That's not a sorry, your luck's out. Talk to leadership about an alternative. What can we do instead? What can these 10 families go do as an alternative? And leadership should provide an alternative, honestly. They should be open to that if enough people are interested in doing so. Because it's important to have opportunities for all groups of people within your church. Number 6, keep trying. Don't give up. If you are not getting the results or approach, you may look to keep it to higher management. And if higher management does not try to include your child through proper integration, then this is not your home. You need to find a church home that loves all its children. Just know love and adaptation are two separate things. So, I say this in my church video as well. If a church can't be the solution, they just don't have the resources, the time management to do so, they should be helping you find a place that does have the solution. Can't be the solution, find the solution. So again, with families as well, if you are pushing up against a wall and it's getting nowhere, and you do not feel like that place is really feeding your family as a whole, and God's just not really allowing for that to really take root there, then you have to ask yourself, like, maybe he's calling me to something else. Maybe there's another group out there that can just understand my situation more clearly. Someone who has a gift. I always say everything is a gift. And so if someone doesn't have the gift to handle your child, you don't want them handling your child. If they don't have the gift to be loving and kind and inclusive to atypical children, you don't want them to be the ones handling your children anyways. So don't be discouraged if they're not the church. Try to find yourself a community of people who can. Number 7, know what your legal rights are at all times. There's a line between physical restraint, safety, and physical abuse. Make sure you set your boundaries clear as to the parameters of correction. And I do talk about this in our church side as well. Being able to talk about what your meltdown plan should look like. Make sure to make clear to any leadership or administration if your child tends to do things like they're a runner, they're a biter, they throw their head back, they throw their head into a wall. Like, there's many different things. They throw toys, they break toys. Make those things clear. I know sometimes it can feel like, maybe if I just don't say anything, they won't do it this one time. But in reality, it's just so much better to be proactive and to be upfront. I'll say it with my own child. I'll make it very clear. And sometimes they'll come back and they'll act shocked, and I'll be like, I told you that was going to happen. Like, I clearly told you that was going to happen. So, you really have to be open to putting yourself in a position of proactive communication. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And it can really help to deflate and de-escalate situations. People are like, thank you so much for telling me that, because now that you have told me that and we're aware of that, we can make arrangements accordingly. And that's what you really want to hear. That's the blessing right there. If you hear someone that's like, wow, that's amazing. I never would have known that your child was struggling with that. But now that I know that, I'm totally going to be conscientious of that situation. Or, I'm so glad that you guys are here, and any resources that we can get for you to feel like this is your church home, this is where you want to be. So just, put yourself in a position to hear the yes. Don't be discouraged if you hear the no. That no just means not here, but it does mean that you are welcomed and connected somewhere. So just keep going, keep going. I could have listed way too many verses when it came to connecting with parents who are going through atypical parenting. And I've been with you in the trenches. I've gone through the lows with this school and the lows with that school, and have decided to homeschool, and have had my highs and lows with homeschooling. And you have your good days and you have your bad days, and you have new challenges that came out of nowhere. And so I do know that those days feel like it can just be easier to do it on your own, because you know your system, you know your kid, you know your family, and it just sometimes it's just even more work to try to integrate somebody else. But the community of Jesus and the community of his fellowship is worth it. So I just want to share a couple of verses with you. Isaiah 42:16 says, "And I will lead the blind in a way that they do not know. In paths that they have not known, I will guide them. I will turn the darkness before them into light, the rough places into level ground. These are the things I do, and I do not forsake them." So you have to show your kids to keep going forward. You have to show them that one person's perspective or negative situation does not define the entirety of their situation in their life. Proverbs 31:8-9 says, "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are uh, destitute." Sorry, I can't swallow right now. "Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy." So, you know, if you're a family member, if you're a church member of someone that you care about that's atypical, maybe you don't have an atypical child, or maybe you're dealing with an adult who's an atypical, college student who's an atypical, so on and so forth. Use the opportunity to say, I really have a passion for this demographic, and I want to find ways to connect them with Jesus. How can I be a resource? How can I volunteer to just love them through their circumstance and their situation? Because we need more people to be the love of Christ, instead of being like, oh, that seems like a lot of work. We know it's a lot of work. We're the parents. We know it's a lot of work. But you know what? We find a way to share Jesus with our kids every single day. And so we're just asking people to love these families through their situations. As he passed, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him." It's John chapter 9, verses 1-3. And it's truly my favorite when it comes to the describing of the community of all that is in store for an atypical family. You have no idea the beauty in the design of your particular child or particular situation. And be encouraged to know that he doesn't associate affliction to sin. He doesn't always associate affliction to something being wrong, but sometimes it's with an intentional beauty to his design, so he can do amazing things that other people would not even know to imagine from someone who carries an affliction. Um, Such amazing design in these kids that I get to watch day in and day out and be amazed by. So I think that there's a way to bridge the conversation between atypical families and churches and nonprofits to be able to design ways to be more inclusive and to create resources to engage with families who want to integrate into church. But it takes one person opening the door for conversation. And so if your church hasn't opened the door for an opportunity, maybe you as the parent, maybe you as a loved one can open the door and start to have the conversation about what it may look like. And again, I encourage you to go watch the other podcast video that I have specifically for churches when I talk about atypical, and give you a really good breakdown of of how I hope that that's a bridge for both of you guys to be able to communicate. I hope this was helpful to you, and thanks so much for checking in.